They handcuffed a black female SEAL sniper in court. Then an admiral entered, and everyone froze. The ceiling fans barely stirred the thick courtroom air. Sweat beaded on brows. Not from heat, but from the tension. A black woman sat alone at the defendant's table, hands cuffed in front of her, jaw clenched, back straight, her eyes fixed on the wood grain beneath her fingers. Commander Nyah Shaw didn't move, not even when they laughed at her. Behind her, the public seats were filled with reporters, small-town locals, and a handful of veterans who hadn't worn their pins in years. "Disgrace," someone muttered. "Lying about being a SEAL. She doesn't look like a sniper." One by one, the courtroom swallowed her in silence and suspicion. She didn't speak. She didn't flinch. She hadn't spoken in 18 days of trial. At the front of the room, Judge Morrison leaned forward, adjusting his glasses like he was about to read from scripture. "We find the defendant, Nyah Shaw, guilty of unlawful dissemination of classified military intelligence." The words hit like bullets. In the gallery, phones were lifted. This was going to be a headline. Nyah Shaw, once a ghost in the field, now a public failure in chains. The bailiff moved to tighten the cuffs. Reporters whispered. The prosecutor smirked. Then, the courtroom doors slammed open. Boom! Everyone turned. In stepped a tall, silver-haired man in a white Navy dress uniform. 4 stars on the collar, bars heavy enough to make a room go silent. Admiral Stephen R. Dalton. The room froze. Mouths hung open. Even the judge stuttered. "We're in session, Admiral." But Dalton didn't stop walking. He looked past the judge, past the jury, and locked eyes with Nyah Shaw. And for the first time in the entire trial, she looked up. Something in her gaze softened. Just a flicker. The Admiral's voice, calm and steel-cut, filled the room. "Remove those cuffs immediately." Gasps. Cameras clicked like machine guns. The bailiff hesitated. "That woman," the Admiral said, "earned the right to be in shackles only when they're polished, because you are looking at a war hero. And if you're not careful, history will look back at this moment and remember who stood and who stayed silent." Dead silence. No one moved. "And you? Where are you watching from? A courtroom of your own? A quiet break room? A coffee shop far from this Georgia town? Tell us in the comments, because justice doesn't just live in courts. Sometimes it lives in the hearts of those who see the truth, even when no one else does." Flashback, 2 years earlier, Yemen, mountains. Gunfire echoed in the dark. A woman in desert camo lay flat against a ridge, breathing slow, waiting for the kill shot. Her rifle didn't shake. Her hands didn't tremble. One shot, one breath, one truth hidden. But she never fired. Not yet. Back to courtroom present. Nyah's voice, "You no longer need my permission, Commander." She stood. The cuffs were still on, but somehow, she didn't look like the prisoner anymore. She looked like the weapon, and the room knew it. Millfield, Georgia, population 8,472, a place where stories travel faster than facts, where a black woman in uniform still raised eyebrows, even in 2025. And where the courthouse had not seen a case this big since the moon landing. They called it the sniper case. Not Commander Nyah Shaw, not decorated Navy SEAL, just the sniper case. She's dangerous. She was caught red-handed. She betrayed the flag. It didn't matter that no one had seen the so-called leaked documents, or that the evidence felt too clean. Millfield believed what the national media said, because she didn't look like a SEAL, because she was quiet, because she was black. Before the handcuffs, before the silence, she was a ghost. Nyah Shaw was recruited at 18, top of her class, marksman record unbeaten. By 22, she had already completed 2 ops no one ever admitted existed. By 30, her name had vanished from every file that could be traced. She spoke 7 languages, could survive with a shoelace and a rock. She never missed a shot. But what made her lethal wasn't her aim, it was her silence. She obeyed. She disappeared. She protected. And in doing so, they erased her. Until the day her own country said she was the leak. 2 years earlier, Operation Downspike, a classified mission deep in Yemen, Nyah led a 5-person covert SEAL team to extract a CIA asset and neutralize a weapons deal. Everything was going according to plan, until someone tipped the target. Half her team died. The other half barely made it out. Nyah returned wounded, but alive. 3 months later, a whistleblower leaked details about Downspike. Somehow, classified kill counts, GPS logs, and voice comms surfaced online. The military needed a scapegoat, and Nyah Shaw had survived when others hadn't. They said she was unstable, that she had disobeyed orders, that she carried resentment for being passed over for promotion. They found encrypted emails sent from her IP, though she had no idea they existed. They quietly pulled her security clearance, then her rank, then her pay, finally her name, until one day she received a letter from the Department of Defense. You are hereby summoned to appear in civilian court under federal indictment for treason, classified disclosure, and unauthorized communication with foreign bodies. And just like that, the ghost was dragged into the light. Why wasn't this handled by the military? That was the first red flag. Answer: jurisdictional loophole. Because the data breach involved a civilian contractor and occurred on a satellite node based in Georgia, the DoD passed the prosecution to the state. Millfield's court system was thrilled. National spotlight, media frenzy, political opportunity. But no one in Millfield believed she was innocent. They believed the uniform was fake. Even after her scars, her old field tapes, and one crumpled black and white photo of her in combat boots, they still laughed. Looks photoshopped. Probably her boyfriend's uniform. So they shackled her every morning and walked her past the cameras. 3 people saw through the lie. Elias Trent, janitor at the courthouse, former Navy machinist. He recognized Nyah's breathing pattern. She breathes like she's still counting targets, he whispered. He gave her a mint on day 4. Didn't ask questions. You walk like you've carried bodies. You ain't what they say you are. Avery Chen, young freelance journalist from D.C., smelled something off in the leaked timeline. Noticed how the timestamps on the leaked GPS didn't match her old deployment logs. Started digging through defense contractor connections. Found names that matched the prosecution's main witness list. Admiral Dalton, her former commanding officer. He hadn't been seen in public for 2 years, but word traveled fast. And when he heard they were putting Nyah Shaw in chains in a public courthouse, he packed his uniform and his rage. Day 17 of trial, they played a distorted audio clip, allegedly from the leak, of someone giving away SEAL coordinates. The prosecution pointed at her. Is that your voice? Nyah didn't flinch, because she recognized it. It was her voice, but not live, not real. It was spliced, twisted, artificially generated. They had used deep-fake voice technology, something she had seen used on enemy targets, and now it was used on her. But she said nothing, because to speak would mean revealing her unit's comm protocols. And those secrets weren't hers to give, even if it cost her freedom. Day 18, final arguments. Nyah was walked in shackled. Same rusted cuffs, same whispering crowd. Judge Morrison asked if she had any final words. She shook her head once. I have nothing to say, Your Honor. The judge looked at her with disgust. A SEAL who won't speak for her country. A beat passed. Then the prosecutor smirked. Or maybe she never was one. Silence. Laughter from the back rows. The gavel raised, and then the doors slammed open. Admiral Dalton's words didn't just echo. They detonated. For the first time, the courtroom wasn't sure who they were judging. The woman in cuffs or themselves. Judge Morrison tried to reassert control. Admiral, I must remind you, Dalton's hand raised. Your Honor, I'll be brief. But what I say you'll want on record. The cameras kept rolling. You're accusing Commander Shaw based on artificial evidence, synthetic audio, and circumstantial IP data. But no one has checked the source code. No one has investigated the contractor with motive. And no one has dared to ask why a top-tier SEAL would suddenly turn on her country after 2 decades of spotless service. Murmurs rippled. The prosecutor stood. With all due respect, this is interference. Dalton stepped closer. With all due respect, counselor, I trained her. I oversaw Operation Downspike. I know what happened. And you're either covering for someone or being played. Outside, reporters sprinted to upload live feeds. The headline was already writing itself. In the back row, Avery Chen's fingers flew across her keyboard. She had already begun linking shell companies, DoD contractors, with political ties to Millfield's mayor, ones that had profited off Downspike's weapon recovery. She uploaded a batch of files to a secure cloud. In the hallway, Elias Trent leaned against his mop cart, listening through the slightly open doors. He wasn't surprised, just sad. Knew she was no traitor, he muttered. The judge ordered a 20-minute recess. The admiral wasn't done. Outside the courtroom, he spoke to the press. I will personally testify under oath. If they want to bury Commander Shaw, they'll have to bury me with her. Back inside, the jury sat quieter. The room felt heavier. A shift had happened, and it wouldn't shift back. During recess, Avery approached Nyah in holding. They're trying to pin it on you because your name is buried deeper than theirs. But I've got something. Timestamps on the GPS data, they were altered. I traced the metadata. Guess where it leads? Nyah stared back, guarded, then nodded once. Cerberus Systems, Avery whispered. Private intelligence firm. They were subcontracted on Downspike for satellite relay monitoring. And guess who owns a controlling stake? Nyah raised an eyebrow. The same senator pushing this prosecution. Day 19, Admiral Dalton returned to the stand as a surprise witness. The defense hadn't requested it, but the admiral submitted a formal brief. He brought declassified mission maps, handwritten evaluations, commendation records, each stamped, signed, and authenticated. But the most powerful thing he brought was a photograph. A grainy, dust-filled snapshot of a rooftop in Yemen. 5 soldiers, 1 woman in the middle, cradling the body of a fallen comrade. Nyah. Same eyes, same scars. Dalton faced the jury. You don't have to like her. You don't have to believe me. But ask yourself this. Why would the military erase someone unless they were afraid of what she knew? The courtroom fell quiet. The prosecutor fumbled objection. This is all emotional manipulation. Then allow me to manipulate you with facts, Dalton cut in. Check Cerberus Systems contractor logs. Cross-reference them with the leaked metadata. If you don't find fabrication there, I'll turn in my own bars. The judge, visibly shaken, allowed the jury to deliberate. Hours passed. Inside her cell, Nyah sat silently, staring at her hands that once held a sniper rifle steady at 700 meters. Hands that had saved lives, now trembling. Not with fear, but with something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Hope. Down the corridor, a clerk raced toward the judge's chambers. Evidence had surfaced. Chen's cloud folder, submitted via emergency legal brief, had triggered a federal motion. The leak didn't come from Nyah's network. It came from Cerberus. And the voice sample? Confirmed as deepfake by a Navy linguist who'd trained Nyah personally. Court was called back into session. Day 20. The courtroom buzzed like a live wire. The jury foreman stood. We, the jury, recommend all charges be dropped, pending federal investigation into third-party tampering. Gasps, cries, and from the back, someone began to clap. Admiral Dalton didn't. He simply looked at Nyah. And for the first time in a long time, she looked back without lowering her eyes. The judge cleared his throat. Commander Shaw, you are free to go. Nyah stood, the cuffs fell, but the weight of the last 2 years didn't. Nyah didn't return home that night. She didn't have a home to return to. Instead, she rode with Admiral Dalton in silence to a private military facility 2 states away, a place that didn't officially exist, the kind of place where truths were buried deeper than corpses. He said nothing for the first hour, just drove. Then, there's something you need to see. He opened a steel case between them. Inside, a file marked S4, Reclamation. 3 months after Downspike, Cerberus filed a recovery claim for weapons that were never listed on inventory, Dalton said. Experimental rifles, AI-guided scopes, tech we weren't supposed to field test until 2030. Nyah flipped through the images, GPS tags, weapon blueprints, a name, Project Reaper. Dalton continued. You didn't just stumble into a bad mission, Nyah. You stumbled into an unauthorized black weapons trial. Cerberus wasn't subcontracting. They were laundering gear through ops like Downspike to test real-world deployment. Her voice cracked. And when I survived, They needed you gone, discredited, buried. She stared out the window. So this was never about me leaking intel. It was about making sure no one believed you if you ever talked. A beat of silence passed. Then Dalton said, "That senator, Charles Marin, he didn't just own stock in Cerberus. He was a founding partner, and he's about to be the next Secretary of Defense." Nyla's stomach turned. "So I'm out of change," she said, "but I'm still a target." Dalton nodded. "Unless we finish what they started." She looked at him. "We?" A shadow of a smile crossed his face. "There's still a few of us left who believe in the flag, not the politics behind it." Back in Millfield, chaos brewed. Avery Chen's story exploded overnight. Ex-SEAL framed, Cerberus ties to federal prosecution trended globally. The courthouse faced a shutdown. The DA resigned. But the real fire came when a federal audit subpoenaed Cerberus's ledgers. Several lines were blacked out. One remained, a name. Lieutenant Miles Corbin, Nyla's former teammate, presumed KIA on downspike. But he wasn't dead. He was alive, living under an alias, and he had signed the authorization order on the day of the leak. Dalton and Nyla hunted quietly, off-grid, cross-referencing bank records, hidden safe houses, flight logs. They found Corbin in a fortified ranch in Nevada, guarded, armed, and terrified when he saw her. He tried to run. She didn't shoot. She simply whispered, "You left us to die." Corbin broke, confessed everything. Cerberus had paid him to sabotage comms, to delay extraction. In return, they'd wipe his debt and give him a new life. They promised it'd look like enemy fire, he whispered. Said it'd be clean. Fast. Nyla's voice was cold. It wasn't. He gave them the drives, signed the statement, and 3 days later was found dead in a motel room. Suicide. Now they had proof. But justice didn't live in headlines. It lived in rooms with no windows. Dalton warned her. "We expose this. It doesn't end with courts. It ends with fire." Nyla nodded. "For my team, I'll light the match." It was always sand that Nyla remembered first. Not the gunfire, not the screaming, not even the smell of burning metal. Just sand, fine, pale, and blinding under a Yemen sun. The day Downspike fell apart began with laughter. Her team had gathered in a makeshift hut, drinking thick, bitter coffee brewed in a battered tin pot. It was the last time any of them would laugh together. Lieutenant Miles Corbin sat closest to her, sketching diagrams in a notebook. Tactical patterns, escape routes. The man who would later betray them had once been the one she trusted most. Eagle 1, he had called her then, her call sign. Thoughtful, weary. "You think the brass back home even knows we're still out here?" She smirked. Confident, determined. "If they forget, we remind them with gunpowder." They were a 5-man SEAL team, elite, anonymous, precise. Mission: extract a CIA asset embedded in a warlord's inner circle. Time 0400. Location: a crumbling village outside Marib. They moved like shadows. Every footstep calculated, every breath synchronized. Nyla gave the final go at 0403. 3 men flanked the north. She entered from the east. The first 2 kills were clean, silent, but by the time they reached the safe house, it was too quiet. The air, wrong. Then the first mortar fell. It wasn't insurgents. It wasn't militia. It was friendly tech, U.S. drones. Her comms screamed static. GPS wouldn't lock. Her HUD flickered. Something had scrambled their signals. She knew in that moment they were bait. Corbin had vanished from the perimeter. Their support vehicle was gone. And still, she pushed forward. Because there were 2 men inside. One was her intel target. The other, Petty Officer Aaron Wells, was only 22. His first mission. She reached them in time to see Wells wounded, cradling his stomach. He looked up at her and whispering, pained, whispered, "They knew we were coming." She dragged them out, gun in one hand, his weight in the other. Shots rang out. Dust exploded around them. Somewhere behind her, Sergeant Deeks was rah! Only 2 made it to the extraction ridge. Her and Wells, unconscious in her arms. But no evac came. For 8 hours, she held the line alone. Firing, repositioning, covering Wells with her own vest. She didn't cry when he died. There was no time. When extraction finally arrived, they called her a ghost. because no one expected her to be alive. But something else waited in the debrief. Silence. No honor. No questions. Just reassignment. She was told to forget, but she never did. She remembered the moment she knew someone had sold them out. She remembered Corbin's notebook, left untouched. She remembered the way he'd slipped out of formation. And she remembered Wells' final words. Weakly, they knew we were coming. The flashback faded. She sat in the dim light of a safe house now, years later, across from Dalton. Her fingers traced a bullet scar on her ribcage. Somberly, I should have seen it sooner, she said quietly. Firmly, no, Dalton replied. You did what you were trained to do. You trusted your team. She exhales sharply. That was my mistake. He handed her a folder. Inside, mission files, satellite logs, the autopsy photos from Wells. Clean kills. No enemy rounds. Just experimental ammo, the kind Cerberus had patented. Her hand trembled, disbelieving. This isn't just corruption, she whispered. Dalton nodded, grimly. It's murder. And that, Nyah knew, changed everything. Washington, D.C., 7:32 a.m. Fog blanketed the Capitol. But inside a private intelligence briefing room, everything was clear. On screen, the full Cerberus leak. Nyah stood in the back of the room, arms crossed, wearing a plain black tactical jacket. The Admiral beside her, the room filled with high-level military personnel, federal investigators, and a handful of trusted journalists. She was no longer the accused. She was the witness, the whistle, the storm. Dalton took the lead. Gentlemen, ladies, you've all read the brief. Cerberus Systems planted experimental weapons tech on foreign soil, leaked intel, sabotaged American lives, and buried the bodies under bureaucracy. He turned to Nyah. Commander Shaw has brought you proof. Not theory, not suspicion, proof. Nyah stepped forward. Her voice was calm, steel-wrapped. Calm, steely. I served this country for 17 years. I watched friends die while following orders. I carried out missions that don't exist on any record. But what killed my team wasn't war, it was greed. She displayed the recovered logs, emails signed by Miles Corbin, transfer approvals, financial transactions, AI-enhanced voice pattern analysis. Calm, resolute, everything points to one man, Senator Charles Marin, Nyah said, and to the private military apparatus he helped build. Skeptical, one agent raised a hand. How do we know this isn't manufactured? Firm, pained, Nyah met his eyes. Because the dead don't fake evidence, and I watched them die. There was no applause, just a chilling silence. Then, action. Within hours, a covert raid was launched. Cerberus's HQ stormed. Servers, drives, black books, more names surfaced. 4 other missions, 3 dead officers, 1 whistleblower who'd been labeled a deserter, now exonerated posthumously. And deep in one vault, a confession video. Corbin, recorded 6 months before his death. Paranoid. Tired. Paranoid. Tired. They used us, told us it was for intel superiority, but they wanted field tests, real blood, real bodies. Senator Marin was arrested during a live press conference. Nyah watched it from the back of a diner. He didn't speak, didn't resist, just stared at the cameras like he couldn't believe the story flipped. The media went wild. Navy SEAL framed. Black female sniper exposes government black ops cover-up. Hero or threat? The woman who brought down Cerberus. But Nyah didn't smile, because headlines didn't bury the dead. She visited Wells's mother in Kentucky, left the medal they never awarded. She stood at Deke's unmarked grave. She cleaned it herself. Dalton found her there, softly. You're not done, he said softly. Resolute, weary. She didn't look at him. I'll never be done. Acknowledging. Elias Trent returned to his janitor job and kept a folded photo of Nyah in his locker, right beside his Navy patch. And Nyah? She disappeared. No press tour, no interviews, just gone. Some say she's in the wind. Others say she trains quietly, teaching young women to survive where the system fails. But one thing's certain, Commander Nyah Shaw isn't done fighting. She's just choosing her own battlefield now. 6 months later, northern Montana. A battered truck rolled up a gravel road at dawn. Snow dusted the treetops. The driver, a woman with calm eyes and a faded scar beneath her jaw, stepped out and adjusted her heavy coat. Nyah Shaw had found peace but not silence. She walked past an unmarked gate and through a wooden arch that read, "The Fireline Academy." Inside, rows of women trained in silence. Field formations, tactical drills, combat recovery. Some wore old uniforms, others, civilian clothes stitched with memory. They were survivors, whistleblowers. Women once discarded by the system, now they were warriors again. Nyah walked down the line. A young woman saluted her. Firm. "Ma'am, new recruits ready." Nyah nodded. Determined. "We train them to survive, not to serve." Dalton stood at the far end of the field, clipboard in hand, his cane replaced by a steel brace. Teasing. "You ever gonna let someone else take charge?" he teased. She smirked. Slyly. "I thought you were in charge," he laughed. "I just opened the gate. You build the future." In Washington, Senator Marin's trial captivated the nation. His lawyers crumbled under evidence. His empire fell. The name Cerberus was now a curse. Avery Chen's documentary aired worldwide. The Forgotten Code, How One Seal Exposed a Shadow War. In a quiet apartment in Detroit, Elias Trent watched it twice, tears in his eyes both times. And in Millfield, the courtroom where it all began was turned into a Veterans Resource Center. The plaque out front read, "Dedicated to the ones who fought and the ones who were forgotten." Nyah never stepped into the spotlight. She declined every interview, refused medals, dodged book deals. She chose silence, but not inaction. At Fireline, she taught young women how to survive interrogation, how to stay alive behind enemy lines, how to speak the truth when the world tells you to shut up. And every morning she touched the locket hidden beneath her dog tags, the one with the photo of her team, Wells, Deeks, Turner, Sanchez. Their faces didn't fade. They sharpened. One night, as snow fell softly, Nyah stood on the rooftop of the academy. Dalton joined her, 2 mugs of coffee in hand, admiringly. "They're calling you a legend now," he said. She didn't answer. Thoughtfully, he added, "You know what I think?" She raised an eyebrow. Sincerely, "I think you gave America its spine back." She gave a quiet laugh. Dryly, "America never lost it, just misplaced it behind paywalls and private contracts." They stood there in silence, steam curling into... Then Dalton said, "You think your story's done?" She shook her head. "No, but for the first time, I get to write the next chapter." Final shot, a new recruit, no more than 18, stares at a target board. She breathes, focuses, pulls the trigger. Bullseye. Behind her, Nyah watches, not as a ghost, but as a guide. If this story moved you, let us know where you're watching from and why you stayed until the end. Because silence is powerful, but so is your voice. Drop a comment, share the story, and subscribe for more real, raw narratives that matter.